The most powerful minds in history spent more time alone than you'd think was healthy. While the world celebrated in crowds, they sat in silence. While others sought validation in numbers, they sought truth in solitude. While the masses filled every empty moment with noise, these rare few chose emptiness and found everything. This is not misanthropy. This is not loneliness dressed up as wisdom. This is something far more dangerous. The recognition that your mind cannot grow in the same soil where everyone else plants theirs. The crowd will comfort you. It will validate you. It will make you feel seen and safe and connected, because the moment you need the crowd to feel real, you no longer exist without it. The question is not whether you need people. The question is, can you survive without their constant presence? And what happens to your mind when you do? Chapter 1. The Crowd Reflex. Why your brain craves constant connection. There is something your evolution doesn't want you to know. You are wired for the tribe. Not philosophically, not morally, but at the deepest biological level, in the ancient circuitry that kept your ancestors alive on the savannah. You are a social creature. Your survival depended not on strength or speed, but on belonging, on being part of the group, on not being cast out into the darkness where predators waited. This is the crowd reflex, the psychological programming that makes isolation feel like death, that turns solitude into panic, that floods your system with anxiety the moment you're alone with your thoughts. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, being alone was death. The exiled starved. The outcast was forgotten. The solitary were picked off by wolves and weather and the merciless indifference of nature. And so your brain learned. Connection equals safety. Isolation equals threat. But here's what changed. You no longer live in the wild. You live in a world where survival is not the problem, where food is abundant, shelter is guaranteed, predators are extinct, where the threats are not starvation, but silence, not death, but the terrifying possibility that you might have to sit with yourself and actually think. And yet your brain, your beautiful, ancient, hilariously outdated brain, cannot tell the difference. It treats every moment alone as if you've been cast out of the tribe. It floods you with cortisol and loneliness, and that gnawing sense that something is wrong, that you should be with people, that you need to check your phone, send a message, scroll through feeds, fill the void with anything other than yourself. This is why solitude feels uncomfortable, not because it is dangerous, but because your nervous system thinks it is. And so you become addicted to social confirmation. You check your notifications like a lab rat pressing a lever. You measure your worth in likes and comments and the number of people who remember you exist. You fill your calendar with plans, your evenings with company, your mind with the thoughts and opinions and judgments of others. Because silence, God forbid silence, is unbearable. You think you're being social. You think you're staying connected. But what you're actually doing is outsourcing your identity. Because the more time you spend absorbing other people's thoughts, the less time you spend forming your own. The more you seek validation from the crowd, the less you trust your own judgment. The more you fill the silence with noise, the less you hear the voice that actually matters, yours. And here's the uncomfortable truth that no one wants to say out loud. Most people never develop an inner life because they never spend time alone. They never sit in silence long enough to discover what they actually think, feel, want, or believe. They move through life like mirrors, reflecting the crowd around them, shaped by consensus, defined by conformity. And they call this normal. But the greatest minds, the philosophers, the artists, the visionaries who shaped history, they understood something different. They understood that the crowd is not where ideas are born. The crowd is where ideas go to die. Because the crowd rewards conformity. It punishes deviation. It smooths out rough edges, flattens complexity, turns nuance into noise. The crowd wants you to think like everyone else, to want what everyone else wants, to become a comfortable replica of the average. And if you let it, if you spend all your time in crowds seeking approval, avoiding solitude, you will become exactly that. Average, predictable, safe. And you will never know what you could have been if you'd had the courage to sit alone and think. Chapter 2. The Philosophy of Solitude. The minds that chose silence over noise. Friedrich Nietzsche spent years alone in the Swiss Alps, walking for hours in silence, battling illness and isolation and the crushing weight of his own mind. And it was there, in that solitude, that he wrote Thus Spoke Zarathustra, one of the most revolutionary philosophical texts in human history. He wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." Read that again. The privilege of owning yourself, because that's what solitude gives you. Not loneliness, not isolation, but sovereignty. The ability to think your own thoughts, form your own judgments, develop your own values without the constant interference of the crowd. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He built a tower, the Bollingen Tower, a stone fortress on the edge of a lake where he could retreat from the world, from patients, from colleagues, from the noise of academia and expectation. He went there to write, to reflect, to engage with the unconscious without interruption. He said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." And that's the paradox, isn't it? You can be surrounded by people and feel utterly alone. You can be at a party, in a crowd, laughing and talking and performing connection, and feel completely unseen. But you can also be physically alone, truly, deeply alone, and feel more connected to yourself, to your purpose, to the universe, than you ever did in company. Because solitude is not the absence of connection. It is the presence of self. The Stoics built their entire philosophy on this foundation. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, surrounded by advisors and politicians and sycophants, still carved out time each day to sit alone and write. His meditations were not meant for publication. They were private dialogues with himself, a practice of solitude embedded in the chaos of empire. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Not in temples, not in nature, not in the company of others, in the self, because the self is the only sanctuary that cannot be taken from you. It is the only territory you truly control. It is the fortress where clarity lives, where identity forms, where the signal emerges from the noise. But you can only access it in silence. And silence, true silence, not the forced quiet of waiting rooms or elevators, but the deliberate, chosen silence of solitude, is terrifying to most people. Because silence reveals what you've been running from. It exposes the thoughts you've been drowning out with distraction. It brings to the surface the questions you've been avoiding, the doubts you've been suppressing, the truths you've been too afraid to face. This is why people fill every moment with noise. Podcasts, music, television, social media, conversations, anything to avoid the confrontation with self. But the minds that change the world, they don't avoid that confrontation. They seek it. Niccolo Machiavelli, exiled from Florence, banned from politics, stripped of power, spent his days alone in a small farm, writing letters to dead philosophers, debating with the great minds of history in his imagination. And it was there, in that forced solitude, that he wrote The Prince, a work so sharp, so ruthlessly clear, that it still cuts through the fog of political illusion 5 centuries later. Solitude gave him clarity, not comfort, not happiness, but the ability to see through the masks, to strip away the pretense, to articulate truths that the crowd would never speak. Because the crowd is polite. The crowd is diplomatic. The crowd says what it thinks others want to hear. But solitude tells the truth. Chapter 3. The Psychology of Aloneness. What happens to your brain in silence? Let's talk about what actually happens in your brain when you're alone. Not metaphorically, not philosophically, but biologically. When you spend time in solitude, real solitude, not just physical isolation, but mental quietude, your brain shifts into a different mode entirely. It activates the default mode network, the neural system responsible for self-reflection, memory consolidation, imagination, and what neuroscientists call autobiographical planning. This is the network that constructs your sense of self, that integrates your experiences into a coherent narrative, that asks the big questions. Who am I? What do I want? What does this all mean? But here's the critical part. This network only fully activates when you're not engaged with external stimuli. When you're scrolling, talking, consuming, reacting, your brain is in task mode. It's processing external information, responding to demands, performing the social dance of interaction. It is not thinking. It is not integrating. It is not creating. This is why your best ideas come in the shower, on walks, in those quiet moments between sleep and waking. Because your brain finally has space to process, to connect disparate threads, to synthesize insights that were impossible when you were drowning in input. Solitude is not empty time, it is fertile ground. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the psychological journey toward wholeness, toward becoming who you actually are instead of who the world wants you to be. And this process requires solitude, because you cannot individuate in a crowd. You cannot discover your authentic self while constantly performing for others. You cannot integrate your shadow, the dark, repressed, socially unacceptable parts of yourself, while pretending to be acceptable. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But becoming who you truly are means separating from the collective. It means sitting with the parts of yourself that don't fit the persona, that don't match the expectations, that make you uncomfortable. And this is painful. This is why most people avoid it. Because solitude forces you to face the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. It strips away the masks, the performance, the carefully curated version of yourself you present to the world. And what's left? Sometimes greatness, sometimes mediocrity, sometimes darkness you didn't know you were carrying. But always, truth. There's a reason every wisdom tradition in history has emphasized solitude. The Buddha sat alone under the Bodhi tree. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. Muhammad retreated to the cave of Hira. Moses climbed the mountain alone. These were not acts of isolation. They were acts of initiation, because transformation does not happen in crowds. It happens in the wilderness of the self. And the wilderness is not comfortable. It is not safe. It is not full of validation and approval and the warm reassurance that you're doing everything right. But it is real. And reality, unfiltered, unperformed, unmediated by the opinions of others, is where wisdom lives. Here's what happens when you actually commit to solitude. The first few hours are uncomfortable. Your mind races. You reach for your phone. You feel the pull of distraction like gravity. Then, if you stay, something shifts. The noise begins to settle. The thoughts slow down. You start to notice patterns you've been too busy to see. The way you talk to yourself, the stories you repeat, the fears you've been carrying like stones. And then, if you go deeper still, something extraordinary happens. You start to hear yourself. Not the voice of your parents, your teachers, your culture, your tribe, but your voice, the one that knows what you want, what you fear, what you're capable of, what you're avoiding. This is the gift of solitude, not happiness, not peace, not some blissed-out state of enlightenment, but clarity, the ability to see yourself clearly without the distortion of others' expectations, the ability to think your own thoughts, form your own values, chart your own path. And once you've tasted that clarity, the crowd will never satisfy you the same way again. Chapter 4. The Modern Mirror. Why we're more connected and more lost than ever. Here's the darkly funny paradox of modern life. We are more connected than any generation in human history, and more lost than ever. You have a device in your pocket that gives you instant access to billions of people. You can message anyone, anywhere, at any time. You can scroll through an endless feed of thoughts, opinions, images, lives. And yet, study after study confirms, loneliness is epidemic, depression is skyrocketing, anxiety is the baseline. People feel disconnected, purposeless, adrift. How is this possible? Because connection without depth is just noise. You're not connecting with people, you're connecting with personas. Carefully curated versions of people, filtered and edited and optimized for engagement. You're consuming their highlight reels while comparing them to your behind-the-scenes footage. And in the process, you're losing touch with the one person you actually need to know, yourself. Social media has turned solitude into a problem to solve. Every algorithm is designed to keep you engaged, to fill every gap with content, to make sure you never have a moment of unstimulated quiet. Because quiet doesn't generate data, silence doesn't sell ads, solitude doesn't keep you scrolling. And so we've created a culture that treats being alone as a failure. If you're not busy, you're lazy. If you're not socializing, you're antisocial. If you're not posting, you're irrelevant. The message is clear. Your value is measured by your visibility. But here's what they don't tell you. The more visible you are, the less visible you become to yourself. Because every moment you spend performing for an audience is a moment you're not developing interiority. Every thought you immediately externalize is a thought you don't fully process. Every experience you instantly share is an experience you don't fully have. You become a curator of moments instead of a liver of life. And your mind, your actual thinking, feeling, creating mind, atrophies. Because the mind is like a muscle. It needs resistance to grow. It needs challenges to strengthen. And solitude is the gymnasium of the mind. When you're alone, truly alone, your mind has to work. It has to generate its own entertainment. It has to process boredom. It has to confront difficult questions. It has to create instead of consume. But when you're constantly plugged into the feed, constantly absorbing other people's thoughts, constantly reacting and responding and performing, your mind becomes passive. It becomes a vessel for other people's ideas instead of a generator of your own. And this is how you lose yourself. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, imperceptibly, like erosion. You start thinking in memes instead of metaphors. You start forming opinions based on what will get engagement instead of what you actually believe. You start measuring your worth by metrics, followers, likes, impressions, that have nothing to do with who you actually are. And one day you wake up and realize, I don't know what I think about anything. I don't know who I am when no one's watching. This is the crisis of modern identity. We have more mirrors than ever. Social mirrors, digital mirrors, constant feedback loops telling us how we're perceived. But we've lost the one mirror that matters, the internal mirror, the capacity for self-reflection, the ability to see ourselves clearly without the distortion of others' gaze. And that mirror can only be found in solitude, not in the performative solitude of aesthetic Instagram posts. Look at me being alone with my journal and my coffee and my perfectly curated book stack. But in the real, unglamorous, deeply uncomfortable solitude of sitting with yourself and having nowhere to hide. Chapter 5. The Practice of Aloneness. How to reclaim your mind in silence. So how do you actually do this? How do you reclaim solitude in a world designed to prevent it? How do you rebuild your capacity for aloneness when your nervous system has been trained to treat it as threat? Not through theory, not through inspiration, through discipline. First, schedule it. Solitude is not something that happens by accident. It will not magically appear in your calendar between meetings and obligations and the 1,000 tiny demands of modern life. You must claim it. 1 hour, every day, non-negotiable. No phone, no input, no consumption, just you and your mind and whatever emerges in that space. This is not meditation, though meditation can be part of it. This is not productivity, though insights will come. This is presence. Time spent with yourself, for yourself, accountable to no one. Second, protect it fiercely. The world will not respect your solitude. People will interrupt. Obligations will intrude. Your own mind will rebel, will tell you that you should be doing something productive, that you're wasting time, that you're being selfish. Ignore it, because solitude is not selfish. It is essential. You cannot give what you don't have. You cannot connect authentically if you don't know yourself. You cannot contribute meaningfully if your mind is just an echo chamber for other people's thoughts. Third, embrace the discomfort. The first few times you practice solitude, real solitude, not just being physically alone while mentally plugged in, it will be excruciating. Your mind will race. You'll feel anxious, restless, bored. You'll reach for your phone 100 times. You'll convince yourself that this is pointless, that you're not the type who needs this, that you're fine without it. Stay anyway, because that discomfort is not a sign that solitude is wrong for you. It's a sign that you desperately need it. It's your nervous system detoxing from constant stimulation. It's your mind learning to generate its own content instead of consuming others. It's the slow, difficult process of remembering what your own voice sounds like. Fourth, create rituals. Solitude without structure can feel aimless, so give it shape. Morning pages. 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing before the day begins. Not for anyone else, not for quality or insight or posterity. Just raw, unfiltered thought. Walking, not power walking with a podcast, but slow, deliberate walking with nothing but your mind and the rhythm of your feet. Let thoughts arise. Let them settle, sitting, in a chair, on the floor, in nature, eyes closed or open. No agenda, just sitting, being, existing without purpose or performance. These are not productivity hacks. These are practices of self-reclamation. Fifth, journal the darkness. Because here's what no one tells you about solitude. It will surface everything you've been avoiding. The doubts, the fears, the anger, the shame, the parts of yourself you've been too busy to feel, too distracted to face, too scared to acknowledge. And when that darkness emerges, and it will, write it down. Not to solve it, not to fix it, not to make it pretty or profound, but to acknowledge it, to give it space, to say, I see you. You are part of me. You do not control me, but I will not pretend you don't exist. This is what Jung meant by integrating the shadow, not transcending it, not eliminating it, but owning it. Because the parts of yourself you deny in public will sabotage you in private. The emotions you suppress will leak out sideways. The truths you avoid will haunt you in insomnia and anxiety and that vague sense of wrongness you can't quite name. But in solitude you can face them, you can name them, you can metabolize them, and in doing so, you become whole. Sixth, notice what emerges. After weeks of consistent solitude, something strange will happen. Ideas will surface that don't sound like anything you've heard before. Insights will crystallize that can't be Googled. Questions will arise that matter more than answers. This is your original mind waking up. Not the mind shaped by education and culture and consensus, but the mind that sees differently, thinks laterally, asks questions no one else is asking. This is the mind that creates. This is the mind that innovates. This is the mind that changes things, and it only awakens in silence, because the crowd will give you knowledge. It will give you information, data, opinions, perspectives, but only solitude will give you wisdom. Chapter 6. Resolution, Takeaway, the Sovereignty of the Solitary Mind. So why does solitude feed the mind while others seek crowds? Because solitude is not the absence of connection. It is the deepest connection possible, connection with the self. And that connection is the foundation of everything else. You cannot truly connect with others if you're disconnected from yourself. You cannot love authentically if you don't know who you are. You cannot create meaningfully if your mind is just a mirror reflecting the collective. Solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. Solitude is having connection with yourself and choosing it. There's a reason the greatest works of art, philosophy, science, and literature were created in solitude. Not because their creators were antisocial or misanthropic or afraid of people, but because creation requires depth, and depth requires silence, and silence requires the courage to sit alone with your mind and let it do what it was designed to do. Think. Nietzsche was right when he said the price of owning yourself is loneliness. But he didn't say it was too high. He said no price is too high. Because ownership of self, true sovereignty, true clarity, true freedom, is the only thing worth having. Everything else is borrowed. Everything else is conditional. Everything else can be taken. But the mind you build in solitude, that is yours. The crowd will always be there. The noise will always be waiting. The validation, the distraction, the comfortable numbness of collective thinking, it's always available. But solitude is a choice, a daily, difficult, deeply countercultural choice. To sit with yourself, to face yourself, to know yourself, and in knowing yourself to become the one thing the world can never take from you. Sovereign, Not isolated, not withdrawn, not hiding from life, but grounded, clear, whole. Moving through the world, not as a reflection of it, but as a force within it. Jung wrote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." Most people spend their entire lives dreaming. Dreaming in crowds, dreaming in noise, dreaming in the endless distraction of other people's thoughts. But you? You have the capacity to awaken, to turn inward, to face the darkness, to build the sanctuary of self that no one can breach, no circumstance can destroy. This is not easy. This will never be easy. But it is the only path to the one thing worth seeking: freedom. Not freedom from obligations or circumstances or relationships, but freedom from the need for constant validation, constant stimulation, constant proof that you matter. Because in solitude, you discover that you matter inherently, not because of what you do or who approves or how many people see you, but because you are, and that is enough. Closing line. The crowd will validate you. Solitude will reveal you. Only one sets you free.